Yes, so today you have 24th of May 2021, and we are basically concerning for the civil services examination conducted by the UPSC. So for that purpose, you must also be studying the national newspapers like the Hindu and Indian Express. Any of these newspapers you can refer, right? And we are also referring these newspapers for these daily current affairs. You can supplement your preparation with the help of these lectures, which are uploaded on the YouTube on the day-to-day basis. So you can subscribe our channel on the YouTube. All right, so let's begin with the lecture. Fine. So first news about International Atomic Energy Agency or IAEA. As you know that there was a nuclear deal that was basically signed, right, between Iran and some of the partners, right? So there was that agreement that was signed between Iran and some of the foreign countries regarding, right, the uranium enrichment and regarding the nuclear weapons, right? The manufacturing process that the Tehran or the Iran is basically secretly making or secretly constructing, right? So here you would be understood about the Donald Trump, which was the previous prime minister, previous president of the USA, have pulled back the USA from this JCPOA or Joint Comprehensive, the deal that was signed with the Iran. Now, after pulling back the USA by President Donald Trump, the recent president or the current president of the USA, Mr. Joe Biden, have, you know, expressed his willingness to join again this agreement that was signed between Tehran and the foreign partners, right? So here, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the main agency responsible for, you know, for the purpose of, you know putting you know basically promote peaceful use of this nuclear energy and to inhibit the use of the these uranium for the military purpose, including the nuclear weapons, right? This International Atomic Energy Agency is basically having the agreement with the Iran with respect to the inspection. Now, this 3 months monitoring deal that was signed between the IAEA and the Tehran was going to be expired, right? And recently, the Tehran or the Iran foreign minister also says that the images that is basically taken from the within the nuclear sites or within the nuclear complexes inside the Iran will not be available because this agreement is now going to be seized completely. Now what is happening is that this basically is most important because ultimately putting the pressure on the Iran to control and to contain this nuclear and armament process or the nuclear enrichment process is also the most important for the purpose of the future talks, which is basically going to be held on the lines of the disarmament or on the lines of the nuclear disarmament. This is a very, very important. So I'll just go a bit brief background about what was happening, right, with respect to the Iran and with respect to the international community. So as you know that the international community is putting pressure on the Iran for the purpose of the nuclear disarmament, right? So that the Iran do not possess some of the enriched uranium for the purpose of building up of these nuclear arsenals, right? So here what happens is the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mr. Rafael Grossi, have recently said that he's in the talks with the Iran, right, for the purpose of expanding this monitoring, the deal or monitoring arrangement which is expired, right? That could impact because the negotiations between the Tehran and six powers that basically signed this JCPOA. I So that was a 2015 nuclear deal that was basically signed, and if that monitoring deal is not been extended, that basically impact this 2015 nuclear deal also. So that is very, very important for the purpose of this one. So here the most important is basically when the US or the Donald Trump, who was the previous president of the USA, when the Donald Trump put the US sanctions on the Iran, specifically in the suspicion that the Iran is secretly building these nuclear arsenals and enriching this uranium for the purpose of the manufacturing of these nuclear bombs. The US put a lot of sanctions, right? And this deal that was signed, that was known as Iran nuclear deal, right? That was on the stake. But now to that report, or to that Buffett reply to the USA, the Iran Parliament has passed a law that basically gave some sort of a IAEA additional protocol which allows the IAEA to conduct the snap inspections within the nuclear installations of Iran, right? Further, in an attempt to open or to keep the door opens, right, with respect to the negotiations, right, the Iran and IAEA both have basically agreed to keep the necessary monitoring agreement that we are talking about this one. Okay, so that agreement or that monitoring deal that was signed between the Iran and IAEA with respect to the keeping of doors which are open further for the purpose of inspection, that monitoring deal was signed. Now that is going to be finished, and because that was the time of 3 months, or the time limit of 3 months. Now, right, that is the most important here. Any future deal, which is the most important aspect here. Now, under joint comprehensive plan of action that I was talking about, the JCPOA, right? So that is the joint comprehensive plan of action that was signed, right, in 2015, right? That is also known as the Iran's nuclear deal, that was signed between P5 plus 1. That means 6 international partners. This P5 plus 1 was the China, France, Germany, okay, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the most powerful nation, USA. These were the 6 countries: the China, France, Germany, Russia, UK, and the most powerful USA, which was the 6 countries which has the deal with Iran, and that is known as the Iran nuclear deal. Okay, now this JCPOA basically gave some sort of a the power to the International Atomic Energy Agency to have some sort of interaction, inspection to those nuclear facilities which are susceptible for making this enrichment, and in that process it was signed. So let us understand about a brief about the International Atomic Energy Agency. So as I told you, that it is basically widely known as the United Nations family, or United Nations agency. It is widely known for the words atom for peace and the development. That means its main motto is to basically to promote the peaceful use of nuclear energy, and to inhibit any sort of a nuclear facility for the purpose of the military purpose, right? Its mandate is very, very wide, right? It's a basically World Central Intergovernmental Forum for the purpose of the cooperation, specifically in the nuclear field, right? Not only about the scientific but also technical cooperation, that was to ensure that the peaceful use of nuclear energy is to be promoted throughout the world, right? It was established as an autonomous organization, right, of the United Nations, right? And now it reports both to the United Nations General Assembly as well as the Security Councils regarding its mandate, regarding its work that has been assigned to the International Atomic Energy Agency, right? The International Atomic Energy Agency currently is headquartered in Vienna in Austria, sorry, and currently 173 members, or 173 countries have the membership of IAEA, right? And it has also won, the Nobel Peace Prize. So here, the IAEA and former Director General Mohammad Al-Bardisi both, jointly have been awarded as a Nobel Peace Prize in 2005 for his outstanding contribution for the purpose of, promoting this nuclear energy for the peaceful uses, not for the military purpose, right? And the current Director General of the IAEA is Mr. Rafael Grossi, is basically an Argentinian diplomat. Okay, he is the first Latin American to hold this top post of the International Atomic Energy Agency in that respect. All right. Next, the China CEEC. What is that? That is basically the Central and Eastern European states. So that is the Central and Eastern European states. Now, let me give you a brief background. There was an agreement. There was known as China's 17 plus 1 cooperation forum. 17 plus 1 cooperation forum. 17 was basically the European countries, or the Central and Eastern European countries, which were the part of this cooperation forum, and one was basically China. So 17 Central and Eastern European countries have come together to form a forum that is known as the China 17 plus 1 Cooperation Forum. Obviously, that forum was promoted by the China, right, for the purpose of promoting the business and investment opportunities between the China as well as these Central and European countries or states. Now, what is happening is that recently the Lithuania, right? Lithuania recently has said that this 17 plus cooperation forum is divisive, right? It is not promoting the business and investment, rather it is creating some sort of a asymmetric investment, right? And asymmetric benefit to the China rather to those Eastern and Central European countries. So Lithuania recently decided to leave this 17 plus 1 cooperation forum completely. So it has left it out, right? And the format or this cooperation forum was founded basically in 2012 in the Warsaw. Fine. Now a bit about about the Lithuania. So recently, the Lithuania's foreign minister have recently told that the cooperation platform that we are talking about, the 17 plus 1, right, is basically some sort of a divisive, right? And it has also urged, or Lithuania's foreign minister also urged all of the European members or European Union community members, the Central European Union or the Central European members or the Eastern European members to you know to leave that forum and to have the more effective 27 plus 1 approach, right? That will be basically for the purpose of Europe's strength and impact, right? That will be much more beneficial for the unity. And that move of the Lithuania is basically shows some sort of a deteriorating relationship between the China and the European Union. That is the strained relationship between European Union and China. Obviously, the Lithuania has left, and other countries are also considering this proposal of leaving the China also in that respect. All right, and the European Parliament, voted in that respect overwhelmingly to refuse any consideration of European Union and China investment deal. So that means they don't want to have any consideration with respect to the European Union and China deal. And as long as the Chinese sanctions against those the scholars was put in the place, that was the most important aspect here. And the Lithuania took the several steps before quitting. For example, it basically blocked various Chinese investment, right? It basically opens the trade office in the Taiwan, right? Recently, many such steps have been taken by the Lithuania in that respect. Now it has just left out to the 16 plus 1 because the Lithuania has left. And what we are talking about is Central and Eastern European countries, that is basically consisting of certain countries which are located in the Central Europe and the Eastern Europe. For example, if you want me to read, or if you want me to tell you the names of those states, you can also understand that the China plus 16 countries. These 16 countries are, for example, you have the Albania, Bosnia, the Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Estonia, Greece, Hungary, Latvia, North Macedonia, right? Montenegro, Poland, Romania, Serbia, Slovakia, and Slovenia. These are the countries which specifically there in the Central and Eastern Europe. And the Lithuania is basically a country in the Baltic region. In the Baltic region, its capital is Vilnius. Okay, so here you could see this map or this is a political map of the Lithuania, right? So the Lithuania, which is also known as the Republic of Lithuania, you could easily see, it is a country in the Baltic region. Baltic means it is located in the basically nearby the shores of the Baltic Sea. So this region is known as Baltic region. Obviously this region belongs to the Europe, so it is a Baltic region of Europe. Okay, now there are other Baltic states also, for example Latvia, Estonia, they are all considered, right, as the Baltic states, right? And the Lithuania basically lies to the eastern shores of the Baltic Sea, right? This is the Baltic Sea and the eastern shore of the Baltic Sea. Okay, you have basically other countries like you have Latvia, you have, for example, to the north. Then you have Belarus to the east and south, right? Then you have Poland to the south, right? And you have Russia to the southwest also. So these are some of the neighboring countries belongs to the Lithuania. Okay. Then you have the Nyaragongo. Mount Nyaragongo. Mount Nyaragongo is basically an active volcano. in the Democratic Republic of Congo, right? It has recently been erupted, right? And it has caused a huge damage to the ecology and the environment over there, right? The Indian army contingents which are working over there under United Nations peacekeeping mission, that is known as the MONUSCO, right, is basically protecting the civilians and the UN officials, right, which are basically associating with those the Democratic Republic of Congo for the purpose of the development, for the purpose of evacuation, right? So here, the Nyaragongo is basically an active volcano. Active volcano means who has the history of erupting in nearly 10,000 years, right? So it is basically having the recent history of eruption. So here, the Mount Nyaragongo is an active stratovolcano. Okay, it's a stratovolcano that was there on the elevation of 3,470 meters, and it was associated with the Albertine Rift. So what is that stratovolcano? See, stratovolcano is something like which is a conical volcano, right? Which is composed of one layers of the hardened lava. So there will be characterized by the steep profile, okay, and periodic explosive erosions will be there, okay. Now, this lava that flows out from them is highly viscous. It is highly viscous. The viscosity is very, very high, in specifically in the stratovolcanic, eruptions, and that basically hardens or cools down, very far, right? Spreading, very far. That is because the viscosity is basically very, very high. So that stratovolcano is basically known as a composite volcano also because of high viscosity, this cannot go further. So wherever they are there, right, they form the steep slope, right? This steepest slope is associated with the less mobile, this lava or this magma which is coming out from this stratovolcano, which basically got deposited in this steeper conical shape, volcano in the layered arrangement, and that basically hardened over the period of the time. Okay, now the next is basically this MONUSCO. See, MONUSCO is basically the full form is basically the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission on Democratic Republic of Congo. So that is the full form of this MONUSCO. I will write it here. That is United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in Democratic Republic of Congo. That is the full form of your MONUSCO. What is that MONUSCO? See, what happens is, as you know, the Democratic Republic of Congo having the huge history or having the latest history of the civil rights, the war crimes, right? The different tribes basically they fought with each other, right? Many people, millions of the people died in those, the civil war like conditions. So what happens is the UN sanctioned this, peacekeeping operations over there in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Okay, now under the UN mandate, this UN peacekeeping operations was there. Now, earlier this peacekeeping operations were there, but now this MONUSCO has took over this UN peacekeeping operations. So this MONUSCO, which I told you, that it is a United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Their main purpose of this organization is to stabilize the democratic conditions or the conditions which are lying in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it is basically done in accordance to the United Nations Security Council resolution. They passed, for that effect, for the setting up of this, to that MONUSCO. The main purpose is basically to provide all necessary means, all necessary support relating to the protection of the civilians, humanitarian personnel, right? The human rights protections, right? And to reduce the threat to the physical violence, right? Support to the governmental agencies, right, of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So all such activities are basically conducted by the MONUSCO, which is an organization which was set up by the United Nations Security Council for the purpose of providing this overarching security. Okay, now regarding this volcano, this is located inside the Virunga National Park, which is also 12 kilometers north of the town of Goma and Lake Kivu. Now when we talking about this volcano, which we are talking about this, you know this Nyiragongo volcano, it is basically having a crater. This crater is around 2 kilometers wide. You could understand this crater. It is something like that. It is around 2 kilometers wide. 2 kilometers wide. Now you could understand that there is a continuous eruption of this volcanic magma, and this portion is basically breaking down and just sinking down in this crater. So this crater now width is 2 kilometers, you could understand. Okay, now it contains a lava lake also, right? This lava lake is something you could understand, that lake just like a water. Now instead of water, it is consisting of the hot molten lava which flows in the lake, and that we call that lava lake, right? And this the Nyiragongo, this lava or Nyiragongo lake that we are talking about is basically the most voluminous lake in terms of the lava, right? And it has lot of eruption history, right, that have erupted, say for example in 1977 also, long back, right? And you have one more active volcano that is known as the Nyamamugria, right? This is another volcano, and apart from that, the Nyiragongo volcano. These two volcanoes are basically responsible for 40% of the Africa's historical volcanic eruptions. Now, the second volcano, one we have understood about this, the stratovolcano, that was the Nyiragongo volcano. The second type of volcano, that is the Nyamuragira volcano. It is basically the another set of volcano which is also the shield volcano. It is also the shield volcano. Now why we call it is a shield volcano? Because a shield volcano is a type of volcano where you will have some sort of a basaltic magma which is of high temperature, right? And the very low silica content, right? And here you will have some sort of the basic lava that can flow to the longer distance. So unlike the Nyiragongo which is having the steep slope, because it is more acidic, right? It is acidic because it has some sort of a high amount of silica, and this basically forms some sort of a steep slope. But this, the second type, that is Nyamaruga Gira. This volcano is having shield volcano because it is not having the steep slope. It is just like a shield, just like a shield. This is this type of this one. You could understand this shield where you will have the gentle slopes. Why it is gentle slopes? Because it is the basic lava which does not have the high amount of silica. So it has the low amount of silica. This low amount of silica allows the lava to flow over a considerable distance before being cooled and solidified. So this ultimately led to the shield-like volcano. All right. So this is not a shield. The Nyiragongo is not a shield. It is a stratovolcano in the layered arrangement, but this is not layered arrangement, right? Here, as the volcano is just like the flowing sheet of the lava over the period of the time. Okay, so here you could see the Democratic Republic of Congo. As you know, this Democratic Republic of Congo, it is having the capital which is Kinshasa, right? It is a country in Central Africa. All right. Okay. Next, you have the Aroville. See, Aroville is basically it's a basically a town, right? Or you can say it is a basically locality which was the project, right? Which was basically adopted in the Velupuram district of Tamil Nadu. All right. So here the afforestation project was basically undertook for the purpose of creating a ecosystem in which, right, the desert plateau can be converted into a unique type of ecosystem with greater amount of forest. So for that purpose, a real afforestation program was initiated in the Velupuram district of Tamil Nadu. Now, a documentary that is known as the Ever Slow Green documentary, that is the name of the documentary, have been selected for the screening at the prestigious the Change Now Summit that is going to be happen in the Paris this year, right? So here the Eruvali, which is basically basically a town in the basically in the Velupuram district of the Tamil Nadu, which has been recently been carved out, right, for the purpose of the afforestation, right? And for that, documentary will be screened at the prestigious the Change Now Summit that will be going to held in the Paris. Now, what we are going to discuss basically here, that in the Arovali Film Festival 2020 also the premiere this documentary which is known as the Ever Slow Green documentary. Okay, now the Arovali, which is the project which was supported by the district, it is the 5th anniversary celebrations in 2018. Now let us understand about this Arovali Film Festival. See, Arovali Film Festival is a biennial event that was started in 2009, and the main aim of any sort of a film festival, right? Take it this Arovali Film Festival is to connect the people's culture, right, within and beyond the Arovali, which is located in the Beruvali, in the Berupulam district of the Tamil Nadu, and to further expand the aspirations of the human unity by showcasing some sort of the films, right, to develop the themes of the human unity and etc. So it is basically a cultural film festival which is celebrated, in the biennial term in the Eruvali. Okay, regarding this prestigious Change Now Summit, as you understand, this prestigious Change Now Summit is basically going to held in the Paris. That is going to be held from 27th to 29th of May 2021, right? It is going to be celebrated or going to be held in the Paris. Now what we know about this Change Now? The Change Now is basically, a mission driven entrepreneur. It is basically an organization which is driven by the entrepreneurs. Now these entrepreneurs basically came together to tackle the urgent environmental and the social challenges that the world is facing nowadays. Now these entrepreneurs are basically working, right, as a workforce to lever this, this leverage this global action with respect to, changing the climate, ending the, and some sort of a plastic pollutions, the new form of agriculture, the new models of education, right, the solutions to the refugee crisis, the clean energy promotion, sustainable cities, and many more except, the objectives with regard to this prestigious Change Now. So as I told you that this Aruvali, which is a, experimental township which is being created within the Velupuram district, right? It is mostly, in the state of Tamil Nadu, but some portion is also located in the basically in the union territory of Pondicherry, which is lying to the nearby of the Velupuram district. Okay. Now this experimental township, which is known as, the Aruvali, was founded in 1968 by Mira Alfasa. The Mira Alfasa was basically also known as Mother. She was the French spiritual guru, and with the association with Sri Aurobindo, right, who was also considered as a yogic stature, right. Now both of them basically, help this Arubali to be formed at that point of the time, and and the Aurobindo was also known, also called, the Mira Alfasa as the mother, right. Now regarding Sri Aurobindo, Aurobindo was basically an Indian philosopher who was also a yogi. He was also a poet, and as you know that he has also contributed in the Indian freedom struggle also. So he joined the movement for the independence specifically in 1910 during the British rule, and he was one of the, most influential leaders, and become the spiritual reformer specifically in the human progress, and the spiritual evolution, all right, in the society. So here you could see the afforestation work which has led to the lush green forest, specifically in the Eruvali town, which is an experimental township in the Velupuram district of Tamil Nadu, which is a great work, and that is the reason, in the Change Now, or in the Change Now summit, right, where this summit is going to held in the Paris. The documentary which is being filmed on this Eruvali town is known as Ever Slow Green, have been chosen for the purpose of this summit, right. All right, next. Next, Sita. What is Sita? Sita is basically an information technology company which is also known as the Society International de Telecommunications Astronaut. Right? It is an international company or multinational company which is basically providing the IT and other services or telecommunication services to the various airline or transportation industry. Now we are talking about the airline industry. So here the Air India, which is a national carrier, have recently claimed that there was a breach of the data, a breach of the personal data with respect to the customers or with respect to the passengers with the Air India from the Sita, right? And that was a breach that was happened in February 2021. So it was a breach of this personal data of the passengers that occurs from the Sita passenger service system, right? So this breach of this data led to the the sensitive data of 45 lakh passengers being now leaked, right, to basically to the open. Now this company that we are talking about, this Sita, was a multinational company. It provides the IT and other telecommunication services to the airline. Now it is also providing the services to the national carrier, that is Air India. This company was formed in 1949, right? And it is now having 2,500 customers with almost, you know, in almost all countries this Sita has its presence. So almost in 2,200 countries, the Sita has its customers. Okay. This is headquarters in the Geneva in the Switzerland, and the Air India basically entered the deal with the Sita in 2017 to upgrade and to provide this, some sort of a IT related and the telecommunication related services, and the Air India basically held these services responsible for those breach of the data. Now, for the purpose of Air India, the Sita was basically implemented, and this Sita provided the Air India lot of facilities like online booking system, online booking engine, right? The departure control system, the check-in, right? Automated boarding control, the baggage reconciliation system, the frequent flyer program. All these facilities are being provided as a IT facilities, as the IT services and the telecommunication services to basically to the Air India for the purpose of better IT services, right? Next, the Sri Kumar Banerjee. The Sri Kumar Banerjee was basically the former chairperson of the Atomic Energy Commission. Recently, the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, former chairman of Atomic Energy Commission, was basically died. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi have expressed the grief over the death of Sri Kumar Banerjee. Sri Kumar Banerjee was died into 23rd of May. Okay, and he was basically a metallurgical engineer. The metallurgical science is basically a one branch in the engineering discipline, right? And he was, the retired chairperson of the Atomic Energy Commission, and he was also held the secretary of the Department of Atomic Energy on 30th April 2012, and he headed various nuclear establishments and signed the nuclear deal with the US also, and also signed the liability bill or the nuclear liability bill. So regarding Atomic Energy Commission is basically, is a governing body of Department of Atomic Energy. So Atomic Energy Commission is a governing body, and Department of Atomic Energy basically works under the direct charge of the Prime Minister, right? And Indian Atomic Energy Commission was set up way back in 1948 itself. Okay, and you know, Mr. Sri Kumar Banerjee was also the DAE or Department of Atomic Energy chairman. He was also held the position of the director of the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, right? This Bhabha Atomic Research Center, he was holding the position of the director from 2004 to 2010, and he was also awarded the Santi Swarup Bhatnagar Prize for the science and technology, specifically in the engineering sciences in 1989, and again he was awarded a Padam Shri in 2005. So let us understand briefly about about Bhabha Atomic Research Center. As I told you that Bhabha Atomic Research Center is basically a premier nuclear research facility which is located in Trombay nearby Mumbai in Maharashtra, and it is being founded by Homi Jahangir Bhabha. So in order to give the contribution, this center was basically renamed in the name of the Bhabha Atomic Research Center. Now, it is basically having a multi-disciplinary research program which is essential for the India's nuclear program. Okay, now this Bhabha Atomic Research Center works and operates under the Department of Atomic Energy, and which is directly overseen by the Prime Minister of India itself. Okay, now regarding Santi Swarup Bhatnagar Prize, the Santi Swarup Bhatnagar Prize is basically generally been awarded for the science and technology, right? It is a science award in India, and it is being awarded annually by the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, right? that has been awarded by CSIR, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, Government of India, every year to the notable and outstanding research, right, which is being done by the individual or the applied and fundamental research in biology, chemistry, or environmental sciences, engineering, mathematics, physics, and etc. Right. So it is basically a science award which is awarded every year by CSIR, Government of India, to the noted persons. Okay. So here you could see the person which is basically signing the nuclear deal was basically your Shri Kumar Banerjee. All right. Next, you have e-court services mobile app. As you know that the Supreme Court of India's the e-committee have released an app that is known as the basically your e-court service mobile app. For that purpose, a manual have also been released. This manual will provide the citizen-centric services free of cost to the all of the citizens, right? So here this app would be available in in the 14 languages, apart from 14 languages including your Hindi and English. So it will be available in the English, Hindi, Assamese, Bengali, Gujarati, Kannada, Khasi, Malayalam, Marathi, Nepali, Odia, Punjabi, Tamil, and Telugu. So in the 14 such languages, the peoples from these 14 regions or 14 states, they can directly check their status through this mobile with respect to the case pendency, right? The case status, right? Lot of other e-court services will also be provided through this mobile app. So this e-courts mobile service app aim to benefit all of the litigants, which basically litigate in the court of the law, right? It will also empower the citizens, lawyers, firm suits, police, and the governmental agencies, which also require to be part of your court proceedings. Okay, so here so far 57 lakh downloads of this app have been held. Okay, regarding this e-committee, what we are talking about of the Supreme Court, this e-committee of the Supreme Court has been in the always in the forefront of introducing this digital services or the digital reforms in the field of law. And in the past year also you could see that due to the pandemic, right, it has also pushed the advocates, judges, and the litigants to adopt these high-tech solutions, specifically due to the closure of the offices or the the courts complexes in the light of lockdowns, specifically in the Delhi. Okay, and it was also having some sort of a concern related to the health. So obviously, working remotely and virtual courts and digital workplaces and electronically management of the cases, right, have become one of the most pressing necessity nowadays. Now it has become an integral to how this legal profession is basically practiced and conducted under this electronic management system or electronic management system on the virtual platform, right? So obviously this gives us some sort of a rare opportunity to embracing this technology, right? So that some sort of a transform in our legal system can also be done in that process, which is more efficient, which is more transparent, inclusive, accessible, and also most important, environmental friendly, because it will definitely cut down the number of or the requirement of the papers which is also needed for the purpose of the court proceedings, right? So here the app would basically act as a personalized digital case diary, right, that will be available to the peoples free of cost, right? And Dr. Justice Dhananjay White Chandrachud, which is a judge of the Supreme Court of India and which is also the chairperson of the committee, have also hailed this manual for the purpose of providing all services to the people. Okay, here what you could see in this app is basically you could search the cases by name and the surname. Okay, you could also save those cases by the year. You could also cases save the cases by the number, right? You could get the QR code printed on your file, right? And you can assess the cases status on one go, right? So here a lot of other benefits will also be there as a part of this e-court app. Next, the Gujarat Freedom of Religion Amendment Bill 2021. Now recently, on the lines of other states, the Gujarat government also amended a bill that was passed in 2003. So the Gujarat government has recently amended the 2003 Act, that is Gujarat Freedom of Religion Amendment Bill 2021. Recently, this Gujarat Freedom of Religion Amendment Bill that is basically amended the 2003 Act, okay, have received the governor's note. So recently, the Gujarat governor Mr. Acharya Devrat have given its assent to the Gujarat Freedom of Religion Amendment Bill 2021, right? Which is also portrayed as a anti-love jihad bill, right? What is that? Is that you must understand this bill basically provide, right, the high punishment of around 3 to 10 years of the jail for the forcible or fraudulent religious conversions through the marriage. For example, if the marriage is solemnized for the purpose of or for the intention of converting the people into the different language, into the different religion. For example, a Hindu woman is basically lured or fraudulently, converted to other religion, right? Uh, for the purpose of converting into the Muslim, right? That is something invite this type of punishment, right? In the Gujarat context, right? So what is happening is that the government of Gujarat have basically, have amended this Freedom of Religion Act 2003. Now, this amendment basically is aiming to reduce some sort of a trend which is emerging, that the women are lured to the marriage, right? They are the easy targets from the men. Specifically, they can be lured to the marriage, and after marriage they can be easily converted also, right? So for the purpose of religion conversion, if they are lured to the marriage, right, that is illegal, right? And that has been, if that is done by the force, by the misrepresentation, or by other fraudulent means, that invite this punishment for the purpose, right? The amendment bill also suggested, also mentioned some of the promises, like if the promises are basically done to the woman with regard to the better lifestyle after marriage or after conversion, or some sort of a impersonation or some sort of a divine blessings after conversion, that is basically also become a ground for the conviction under this act or under this bill. Okay, the state of Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh have already enacted the similar level legislation, which is also in the lines of the anti-love jihad laws, right? And the government is basically trying to reduce all sort of fraudulent conversions which are happening for the purpose of or for the sake of the conversions, specifically the women. Now, there are a lot of changes which have been made, right, in this bill, so that this some sort of a convergence, specifically in another religion, for the purpose of with the help of these marriages, can be stopped. Okay. Next, you have the live-in couples. As you know that the live-in couples or the live-in relationship that we are talking about is basically the couples which stay together without marriage. Okay, recently the Punjab and Haryana High Court have said that the live-in couples or the couples which is staying together just like a husband and wife but without marriage, right, they also receive or they also deserve the same protection as the married couples. So that means the Punjab and Haryana High Court have recently equated the live-in couples with the married couples. That means the live-in couples will also be entitled of receiving the similar set of protection just like a married couples. So obviously, the Punjab and Haryana High Court have chosen this one because it is basically the individual has the right to formalize its relationship with the partner, right? He is free to choose his partner either through the marriage or through some sort of a non-formal approach like live-in relationship, whichever he would like to have its relationship. He or she is free to do that relationship or free to formalize this relationship, and it is an individual right under Article 21 that the couple can live in the live-in relationship and they will have the similar set of the right just like a married couples. Okay. Next, as you know that live-in relationship in India, what we are talking about, unlike marriages, what we talk about, the live-in relationships, couples are not married per se, and they are not married to each other, but they live together under the similar roof. That resembles, some sort of a relation like a marriage. Okay, so in other words, you can say that, we can say that it's a cohabitation in India. Only those relations between a man and woman, which is considered, the legitimate where the marriage have been taken place. And obviously, this type of, relationship or this type of cohabitation without marriage is not considered some sort of a legitimate, right? They are considered illegitimate, and the existing marriage laws otherwise, deemed to be, not respecting these couples, specifically those living relationship type of situations. So the judge of the Punjab and Haryana High Court have further said that the live-in relationship is not illegal, right? It's not illegal because as we contain or as we thought that it is illegal, right? And the society has been always, putting the very harsh, uh, you know, uh, thing about those couples, specifically those live in the living relationship. So obviously such type of harsh objection on those couples is basically against their life and liberty under article 21, so which is also a fundamental right which is being given to every section of the society, including those couples which are residing as a living relationship. Okay, now such relationship obviously is not prohibited under any law which is in the currently in the force. Nowhere in our country, nowhere in India, we have such type of prohibition that we cannot live in the live-in relationship. Yes, you can live in the live-in relationship. There is no offense for that purpose. Okay, and High Court also directed that concerned superintendent of police to ensure that such couples which are living the live-in relationship, they should be given full protection, and they should not be allowed to get some sort of a harm from either from from the society or from their relatives also, right? So they should have the equal entitlement just like a married couples in the society. Okay, here you could see the couple which are enjoying. Okay, next, the Arctic warming. Okay, so here what is happening is that the Arctic Ocean is there in the North Pole. Now what is happening is that that because of the climate change, the average temperature is increasing. Okay, now this average temperature is increasing. Now this Arctic Ocean is feeling, right, or it is getting warmer much higher pace than the average temperature of the earth, right? So it is quickly warming, so it is almost 3 times more quickly warming than the planet. So that Arctic Ocean is more quickly, is the pace of the warming is more quick, right? And it is almost 3 times, you must understand. And here the Arctic sea ice, that is almost depleting nowadays, because almost it will entirely disappear in the summer. That is you know that is if the warmth is basically by 2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level. You could see that even that agreement that was signed in 2015, Paris Accord, right, that the worlds basically have set up the target of having 1.5 degrees Celsius rise, or controlling the temperature of 1.5 degrees Celsius, not beyond that, right, when you compare with the pre-industrial level. So when we're talking about this Paris Accord, this is basically an agreement that was signed within the United Nations Framework Convention on the Climate Change, or that is UNFCCC, right? That was signed under the UNFCCC on the climate change mitigation, adaptation, finance, right? Which was signed indefinitely in 2016. That was the day of enforcement. Okay, so this Paris Agreement that we are talking about is a legally binding international treaty on the climate change, and it was adopted in the COP21, right, that was held in the Paris, okay, on the December 2015, and it was enforced, or it was came into the force in 2016, or November 2016. So it is the date December 2015 when this Paris Agreement was signed by 196 countries. You can understand 196 countries have signed. Now, the main goal of this Paris Accord is to limit the global warming, right? Preferably, to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial level, right? And obviously, to achieve this long-term goal that we are talking about, right, you must have, controlling this greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible, because otherwise it will be very difficult to control this temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius, right? So here what we are talking about, this alarming findings was basically found from the Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program, right? As well as it is also coincided with the ministerial meeting that was held with respect to the Arctic Council, right? Both of these assessment basically coincided, right? That means the Arctic ice are basically depleting very fast. The Arctic region is basically warming with almost 3 times much higher pace than the normal Earth, which is basically heating over there. So in almost half a century, from 1971 to 2019, you could understand that the Arctic's average temperature rose by 3.1 degrees Celsius, right? When you compare this time from 1971 to 2019, the average planet temperature rose only 1 degree Celsius, but the Arctic temperature rose to 3.1 degrees Celsius. Okay, now let us understand about this Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program. See, Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program is basically an Arctic Council working group. So it is a working group of Arctic Council, The main purpose of this Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program is to provide the reliable and sufficient information, right, on the status of and as well as the threats to the Arctic environment, specifically the Arctic environment, and provide some sort of a scientific evidence or advices on the actions that to be taken, right, in order to support these Arctic governments, right, in their efforts to take, some sort of a remedial or the preventive, actions related to the adverse effect of the climate change on this Arctic region. So this Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program is one such working group which is aligned with the Arctic Council. Okay, it was set up in 1991. Okay, now with regard to Arctic Council, now you must understand Arctic Council is basically an intergovernmental forum. It is an intergovernmental forum. The main purpose of this Arctic Council is to basically to have the promotion or to have the cooperation specifically in the Arctic environment. So it is a leading intergovernmental forum that promotes the cooperation, coordination, interaction among those the Arctic region member countries or Arctic states, right? And as well as to promote, the developmental activities related to the indigenous people which are inhabitants specifically in the Arctic region. This Arctic Council was basically formed in 2000, in 1996. Okay, these Arctic states basically, define those states which are part of this Ottawa Declaration. So Ottawa Declaration that we are talking about, okay, that basically decide or define the Arctic states or the members of this Arctic Council. So this Arctic Council is basically, is a culmination of this Ottawa Declaration. So after Ottawa Declaration, Arctic Council was basically set up. So you could understand that in 1996, when this Arctic Council was set up, the Ottawa Declaration was basically signed by the representatives of the Arctic state in the Ottawa. The Ottawa is a town, right, in the basically you have the Canada. It is a town in the Canada which was the most important town where this Ottawa Declaration was basically signed. So here the Ottawa Declaration provides the countries or the states which are representative of the Arctic states. Representative of the Arctic states, they are basically the Canada, okay, Finland, Norway, okay, Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, okay, Russia, and the most powerful USA. So as you see the map of the world, specifically see this Arctic Ocean, just put the North Pole over there, Arctic Ocean. You see this almost all countries basically touches, your Arctic Ocean. So that was the reason they are the most important stakeholders in the Ottawa Declaration. And the Ottawa Declaration has led to the culmination of this, the Arctic Council. So Arctic Council was established as a high-level forum to promote, some sort of a cooperation out of this Ottawa Declaration. All right. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. We have a brief delay today for this lecture. So definitely we'll come out tomorrow. And please be safe. Take care of yourself. We'll meet again tomorrow. Thank you very much.